see it. Can I make it bigger? Does it start cutting off? All right, we're going to keep it at this size, 125%. Readable, right? So, oh, and we got the trade offer link from Truck P. Thank you very much. Cool. You're all set. Thank you. So we're going to just start taking a look here at the balance changes from Valve themselves. This is quite exciting. I think we are all pleasantly surprised to see this today. So we'll just get into it. So in the past, they've made blog posts about changes they've already shipped or stuff we've tossed onto the smoldering scrap heap of failed ideas. This time, based on your feedback, we're going to talk about the changes while we're still working on them. Below is a sneak peek at some of the changes coming in the next major update, along with some commentary. These changes are based on online community discussions, emails, playtime data, conversations with players of all skill ranges, and playtesting. Things to keep in mind. Alright, the important stuff. The important stuff. Thank you for the cheer, Sasfaria. This is not the complete list of changes. Some items and classes are still being worked on. They are not ready for review. So I find this actually to be pretty interesting. So I'm surprised that they would put these out now if there's things that are still being worked on. And that also makes me question the timeline of everything. So yeah, it's kind of strange. I'll be honest. But let's keep going. Going deeper on some classes like Scout and not as deep on others. Demo Man. I think Scout probably has the most. Here, let's actually let's look this up 1 sec. We're gonna go to this website right here. Check this out. Okay. We're on whitelist.tf, looking at the global whitelist. You'll notice that the class with the most banned items is actually Scout. So I think giving Scout some attention, like a focus in this update, is actually a pretty informed decision because he seems to have some of the most problematic unlocks. So let's jump on in, shall we? It's a work in progress. Items may change. Yes, that's kind of the whole point, isn't it? And this is also quite important, all right? I want you guys to please pay attention to this. Let it sink in. Please continue to send your feedback through the contact form on the right taskbar. Let's find it. Where is it? How do we contact? There it is. Right next to it. Hearing from you helps us prioritize our work and influences the direction the game moves in. That's great to hear, isn't it? All right, that's what you've been wanting to hear all along. They're trying to listen. They're trying to hear. You guys need to just participate, all right? Contact them right here. Or post on the forums. You know, a lot of this, they said, is based on, what, community discussions? So just get your conversations out there. And yeah, that's how you can help this process. But let's begin. All right. Multi-class, panic attack. This is one of our least used weapons. So this is important, actually. It seems that a big deal to them is statistics about equip rates. So if a weapon is not often equipped, it's more likely that they're going to give it some attention, all right? And I think that you will see that a couple times throughout this page. So that's a big thing to keep in mind, especially if you're like maybe wondering why certain items are being changed over others. This could be one reason. All right. The main culprit seems to be the queued or delayed fire aspect, which fights against the basic concept of a secondary slot on classes that can use this weapon: Soldier, Heavy, Engineer, and Pyro. Players generally expect a secondary that is immediately ready to fire, for the rare case where their main weapon isn't available. Running out of ammo, okay. Or isn't the optimal choice if they're airborne or too close to you. Okay. True, very true. Removing the queued or delayed fire concept basically invalidates the original design, so we've started over. That's another good thing to see, is that, you know, sometimes if they think something has failed, they might just scrap it and try and come up with something new and interesting. Pretty good. And they also offer a goal. Make the weapon immediately usable. Remove the large burst potential, which is hard to balance, and give the weapon a unique design space to occupy. Oh. Yo, Pterodax, thank you for the $5 tip there. Ooh. You love TF2 and Coheed. Well, that's good to hear. I hope you're enjoying the stream, but I must press on. We can chat later. So there's a completely new design. And again, I want to remind you guys here that the goal is probably like it's probably the most important part for you to focus on when you look at all these things is what's the goal, and then you consider what the design is, and then you see, did this design achieve that goal? All right? So that's how I think you guys should think about these changes, all right? Because if you disagree with the goal or if you agree with the goal, that's pretty important. I would completely agree with this goal and their explanation. The panic attack definitely doesn't feel, reliable. Um, I would almost never. I already never give up my gunboats for shotgun, so to give it up for something like this would be pretty crazy. And I personally hate weapons that shoot that fast, just because I tend to miss when things just like have such rapid fire, like the Force of Nature or the Beggar's Bazooka. I prefer to like be much more careful with each individual shot. So I never did like the original Panic Attack, though I did think it was kind of cool, but this explanation is correct. New design, 50% faster switch speed, 50% more pellets, 30% less damage, fires a wide fixed pattern shot. Shot pattern grows with successive shots, but resets after you stop firing. So with the faster switch speed and the more pellets, it seems like if there's someone weak, like right in front of you, and you switch to the panic attack, you'll probably be able to finish them off pretty consistently. It would probably be really good for that. But obviously, being like a dependable like meat shot weapon or something like that might be a bit worse. It'd be hard to tell kind of how these two things stack up against each other. Like I'm having a hard time like picturing whether that will result in more damage or less. I imagine if you hit a meat shot, it might be slightly more. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But yeah, this could just be like a cleanup pepper type weapon, like a maybe a pistol-esque kind of thing for the soldier, but mainly going to be effective on that first shot. So all this like even if it does more damage on that first shot, like really close up, eventually it would start decaying um, and becoming less effective with each shot. Um, so I actually think this is a pretty decent side grade to the shotgun, which is pretty cool because so far there's only really been gunboats or shotgun. I mean, there's the banners too, but having like another type of shotgun that's like viable is pretty cool. So I think this is a great change, and I hope to see people use that. I'll give it a shot too, of course. All right, now moving on to Spy. Right at the top of the list, the Ambassador. It's by far the most controversial of all the changes. Um, as I predicted too, because I've I've seen this list for like months, talking to Valve, so I like warned them that this ambassador shit, this is gonna be fucking controversial. So I don't know. I think we've seen that. Anyways, the ambassador. Players that are headshot from across the map are expecting to see a sniper in their death cam, but they sometimes see a spy with a revolver more often than we'd like. Yep, I would agree. The goal then is to reduce the effective combat range to something more reasonable and expected with the spy, which is, I would say this is a very noble goal, and I would say that this is a very fair assessment. Like, all of this stuff makes sense. So the way that they've proposed to address this goal, keep in mind, the goal is the important part here. This stuff is what you can discuss, mainly, if you agree with the goal. The change. First shots are no longer perfectly accurate. Bullet spread is instead reduced by 50%. This makes headshots less reliable at long range, while they're still viable at close and medium range. Woo! What's up, Hurry Birdman? Thank you for the resub, 25 months. What is this communication from Valve? Yes, that is exactly what this is, and we're hoping that it happens more often. Some, if you showed them this, they would file this under the fiction category, but no, this is in fact reality, and we're happy to see it. So let's enjoy it. and take advantage of it by discussing this stuff. So yeah. So my understanding of what this means is that bullet spread being reduced by 50%, um, and this reference to them being very viable at close and medium range. Oh, fuck. Thank you, Dooku, also for the resub for 22 months. Long-term resubs here. Thanks, boys. So these, the way that this is written makes me think that they're actually making the weapon have less spread. So in close range, like, you'll be able to still hit people very reliably. But just at long range, like, since the head hitbox will be so small, like, you're most likely gonna miss. But the problem with that is that headshots will still exist. So this is kind of what I've seen people kind of critiquing about this, is just that while you are gonna miss more, and when you do miss, you are reducing the effective combat range of the spy, the thing is, sometimes you're still gonna hit, right? Sometimes you're still gonna hit, and that's kind of random. So the situation is not going to be completely eliminated, and there's potentially going to be close range situations where you'd expect to hit a headshot where you won't. So the randomness, it's only going to kind of annoy people, I think. I think that if they want to reduce the effective combat range of Spy with headshots, while this might work, and I'd have to try it to know for sure, because as long as it works really well in close range, which it should, right? Like, assassination style, if you're going for headshots, you're probably not going to miss, right? But if you're, mid range or whatever, it would probably operate more like the revolver, like the normal revolver, um, which is fine. But I think people are very attached to like the sniping aspect of the Ambassador. So I think you could maintain the sniping aspect, assuming that this doesn't actually like work and doesn't feel okay, because it's kind of hard to theorycraft. But yeah, they could just make it so you can't headshot at long range. You know, that would really fix it, I feel like. And then you wouldn't need to bother with this close range stuff, because hitting a headshot in close range is already very, very difficult to do, and people, in close range against a spy tend to have a huge advantage. So there's already enough like risk and reward with Ambassador in close range. So I don't think close range headshots are a problem. So adding RNG to close range is kind of silly. But then long range, if you want to eliminate long range headshots, I think, yeah, after a certain range, you should probably either just do mini crits or have like immense weapon fall off or damage fall off or whatever. So that would probably be a more well-received way to approach it. But again, I'm still not entirely against this, because I feel like it still achieves this goal, but maybe not in the ideal way. So I'd still say this is still a step in the right direction. It's just maybe not the perfect solution yet. So if you have more thoughts on that, again, contact Valve. All right. Next, we go to the Dead Ringer. Feign death is an interesting effect, but a good spy can use it extremely frequently, making it frustrating to play against and reducing the risk of using it nearly constantly. I would agree. So the goal, rather than make it less interesting, let's make it more predictable to fight against, by removing methods by which spies can reduce its cooldown. This should create more of a rhythm to fighting against a spy using this, and introduce a little more risk to the player using it. Seems like a pretty good goal. My experience playing against the Dead Ringer, like, especially on a map like Badwater, where there's like a million massive ammo packs everywhere, is that spies almost never die. And it is kind of frustrating. I don't know, because the guaranteed ability to pick up ammo packs and just keep feigning death does feel like a get out of jail free card over and over. So, I could see this being, well, what the change is. I like the goal. So the change is Ammo kits and dispensers no longer refill the spy's cloak meter. So what that means then is, as a spy with the dead ringer, you have to just wait out the clock for it to refill, right? That's pretty much it, right? So you just have to be a little bit more careful, I guess. And using your dead ringer is more of a, I don't know, it's more of like a one-time thing for per each engagement, which I think is fine. Like you can trigger it, run behind, and then you're set up to flank. Instead of you trigger it, you run behind, you flank immediately, you trigger it again, you get another ammo pack, you try and flank, and you trigger it again and again and again and again. So I think that this just makes you have to be a little bit more like methodical and I don't know. Um, what I like a lot, you'll notice, is they keep emphasizing this though. Risk, risk. It's very important. And like, yeah, I think that that's something I like a lot is that they're trying to introduce more risk reward things, and I think this achieves that for Spy. Um, I don't know. Besides, Spy is already fucking effective with invisibility watches, so I don't really think this is that big a deal. I'll be honest. The Dead Ringer was also buffed to give you that speed boost, so you know, as far as the Dead Ringer goes, it's still probably gonna be quite effective for infiltrating and all that kind of stuff. Next one, your eternal reward. This is a least used spy knife. While silent kill and rapid disguise on kill are good, the downside on this knife is extreme. So the downside to this knife currently is that you cannot disguise right here, which has been removed. They added non-kill disguise, require and consume a full cloak meter. Backstab-based disguises are still free. Increased cloak drain by 50%. So you still get an instant disguise when you stab people, but you can also disguise when you're not in, when you don't kill anyone, which is actually, I think, a huge buff, to be honest. Because now sentries are a lot less of a problem for this knife. You can flank engineers without getting shot by sentry guns. And obviously, if you get seen, you're less likely to be instantly shot at. Increase cloak drain rate by 50%. So this one, it's making it more like disguise based, I guess. Less about like cloaking around and being sneaky, but more probably emphasis on getting those chain stabs and instantly changing disguises over and over and over again. And I actually really like this weapon in pubs. It's fucking so satisfying, man. Um, I think it's pretty cool. But yeah, obviously there is a cost to disguising. You have to use your cloak meter. So whereas in the past you'd like cloak in while not disguised, try and stab someone who's like isolated, now you can be a little bit more aggressive probably with your disguise, but you might need to wait for your cloak meter or just pick up ammo. It's not really that big a deal. Like I'm sure you could like have a route where you're rolling out, you disguise, pick up ammo, you're good to go, you know? So that's fine, I'd say. I feel like people will use this more. Now that this disguise thing has changed, people will probably use it more. And again, remember, this is the least used knife. So they're trying to like adjust it so that it's a little bit more appealing, so that it's not just completely overlooked, you know? So I think it's a good change. All right, moving on to Scout. Scout. This is the one that has the most changes, which is good, good, good. Sandman. First of all, the feedback on this weapon has been consistent for a while, and by a while they mean like 8 years. Players really hate losing the ability to fight back. Compounding this, the ball has to travel really far in order to disarm players. Being hit by a long-range ball more often than not ends up feeling random rather than skilled. I would agree. You can't really aim a ball that far. You can kind of like see, there's an enemy in that general vicinity, and you're just gonna like toss it, but it for the most part is pretty much random, or you just spam it and it hits someone. So getting a full stun for that was, I think, a bad thing. But yeah, here we go. Changes. Long-range ball impacts no longer remove the victim's ability to fire their weapon, but the victim is still slowed. Alright, so this is a huge one for sure. Max range balls now do 50% increased damage from a base of 15. Still barely does any damage. Flight time required to trigger the max effect has been reduced by 20%. Okay. Ball regeneration time reduced to 10 seconds from 15. Okay. So, you can hit max effect balls more often, and you can throw balls more often. Okay. So the main important one is going to be this one. The removal of the stun, which is probably huge, really. You used to just fucking like sit there, unable to move, just in like a taunt, and you just see them running at you, and you know you're gonna die, and there's nothing you can do about it. But now, I assume you're just gonna be in first person like normal. You're gonna feel slowed, and you can kill them. So even if they do hit you, a scout, like if I'm a soldier and I get hit by a ball, and a scout thinks he's gonna run at me, he's still gonna eat the 2 rocket. You know what I mean? So I think that should be fine. Like slowing people down, it's not really game breaking, I don't think. Especially when it's a skill shot. But the fact that you can do it so often, I don't know, people are still gonna be upset about it, I'm sure, but I don't think it's game breaking by any means anymore. So unban the Sandman. Alright, moving on to Bonk. Bonk. Alright. Bonk Atomic Punch. This weapon was designed to allow scouts to pierce hotly contested areas. While it does this quite well, it doesn't require enough skill or carry much of a downside. Look at that. An emphasis on skill. At least in their explanation. Let's see if they've achieved it. Changes. Apply a slow effect to the player after phasing wears off, based on the amount of damage they absorbed. Why would someone spam me on Steam right now? Alright. So there's a slow based on damage absorption. So that's a completely new trait to this. So from minus 25% speed at low damage to minus 65% at 200 plus damage lasts for 5 seconds. So the slow effect lasts for 5 seconds, I assume, and the bonk like phasing still lasts 8 seconds. So no matter what, after bonk wears off, you're gonna be 25% slower for 5 seconds. And if you are getting like shot at, or if say you run through a choke and you eat spam and a sticky trap, or you tank a sentry, you're gonna be 65% slower. So the problem with bonk was always, yes, you could pierce through choke points and you could, you know, bait out traps, run straight behind, and then the bonk would wear off and you'd have no pistol. That'd be basically the downside to bonk. No pistol. But then you'd be in behind and, you're ready to take 1v1s and just cause all this chaos, and you could just go fucking wherever you wanted. But now, you're going to be slowed, so people can easily chase you down, and it'll be easier for them to win a 1v1 against you if you're moving 65% slower. Like, if I was a soldier, and I see a scout bonking at me, I'm going to juggle him with 2 rockets, and then he's going to still try and run behind me. I'm going to do 1 rocket jump, cut off his exit. His bonk's going to wear off. He's going to be 65% slower. And if I lose that fight as a soldier, I mean, I'm sure I have a scout with me too, right? Like, that scout's dead, guaranteed. So I think that this is... And, yeah, I think this is... It's reasonable. It's reasonable enough. But it's hard to say. The best thing for a scout to do now with bonk would be run in, then run out, pretty much. Because if you run in and commit, you're going to be at risk of taking these 1v1s at a slow speed, which is a huge disadvantage. So there really is this aspect of risk reward and like a heavy weight to the decision making of pushing as a scout with bonk. I ran bonk a lot in Highlander, especially on CP Steel. If you guys were playing Steel this week in Highlander, you might have played against some bonk scouts. Sweet. Thank you, Paradise, for the sub there. By the way, to all the subs, I'll check back in with you after I'm done with this. All right. Anyways, so yeah, I ran bonk a lot on like steel, or I'd run it on payload maps in Highlander, and it was pretty good for getting behind, but I was always taking like shots when I was running. Like there was a sentry shooting me, there was like a heavy shooting me, and all that. So I would almost always, that I can think of when I was running bonk, would almost always get this slow afterwards if it was applied back then. So I see this being a pretty big deal for most people. And I will also mention that the last time I saw the bonk on the changelog that Valve sent me, there was an additional change, an additional stat, which I was very displeased with, and I let them know about it, and they actually removed it. So it's not here. And I was expecting it to be here, but it's not. So I'm actually very thrilled by that fact that it is not here. So I'm actually pretty happy with this bonk, and I'd like to I'd like to try it. I feel like it won't be game breaking anymore, just because of the downside to it, that pistol might just be a more consistent choice, to be honest. Um, Flare, also thank you for subbing. Thank you guys. Hope you're enjoying this, by the way. And no, I can't tell you what the specifics were. I'm sorry. Okay, Pretty Boy's pocket pistol. This weapon is one of the lower owner equipped items in the game. Looking at the current design, it seems that not taking fall damage ranks pretty low on the value scale for a scout, and a flat 20% damage taken penalty is basically the kiss of death for a low health class. Yep, I would completely agree with this. Fall damage you can already avoid by double jumping and just not being, I don't know, it's just never really that relevant. So it's definitely low value. Um, and that 20% damage that you used to take, or that you currently take, I guess, until this is implemented, if it is, um, you get just one shot, you know? So it was a weapon that really you wouldn't use ever because, like they said, you die as a low health class. So their goal is to make the weapon less of a liability and focus it as a get health quick tool with decent burst at the expense of total damage. So it's kind of a complete redesign. Basically every other aspect that they had on it before they didn't like, so they're going for a completely new design here, which is 15% more firing speed, 7 health per hit instead of 5, and minus 25 clip size, so 9 shots. So this is another one that sounds really powerful on paper, because of the health received per hit. So you have 9 shots, 7 health per hit. You can get about half your health back if you hit every single shot, which in a 1v1 would be pretty damn like useful. Like, say you're fighting against a soldier. I tend to hit decent pistol on soldiers, so I could see myself using this a lot. But the thing is, with the extra firing speed, if I'm tracking someone at a pistol rate, if I was tracking them at this rate, I might miss more often. I don't know. But maybe not. And then with this one, there's only 9 shots. So this is the other thing. Like, if your crosshair is even off them for like 1 shot, it has such a huge weight to it because you only have 9 shots. And using the winger sometimes, I felt like I just couldn't kill anyone because I'm so used to having all 12 shots that this could honestly make it balanced, having only 9 shots. It's really hard to tell. It's something that I would have to test out. But I really do like the new design. I think it feels like there might be like a nice like variance in playstyles now between regular pistol, pocket pistol, the winger. I feel like you also can't forget like the winger being so useful makes this one have another sort of aspect to it because you won't just default to using this if you really love using the winger. Like if you really love climbing the crates on granary or jumping up to spire, or if you use it to weave when you're jumping out or when you're initiating in fights. So unless this is like incredibly overpowered, I feel like it will sit well with the other pistols. I might even still just use the regular pistol just because of the shots, but we'll have to see. I feel like this might be more of a flank type weapon just because of the health regen. You have less heals if you're playing the flank, so being a little bit more self-sustaining, you can really be like that roaming scout. If only roamers use like the black box, your medic could give your pocket fucking 60%, you know? And then you just tell all your flank players, yeah, just equip those self-sustaining healing weapons and get the fuck away from me. And get that health pack over there. So I actually like this change, and I looking forward to it. I hope they keep something similar to this. And moving on to the Criticola. All right. The last change to this item added Marked for Death when the effect ended. This was okay because it forced scouts to get out after a little while, but it didn't add any risk in the moment. Goal: add more decision and thought on when and where to activate and how to manage the risk reward of the effect. Changes: added each attack while active adds Marked for Death debuff for 5 seconds, doesn't stack. Removed Marked for Death when effect expires. Removed 25% speed bonus. Removed 10% damage taken penalty. So by far the most important thing here is the speed bonus being removed. Actually, now that that's removed from this, I'm like, I think that this weapon, like regardless of any of this other shit, because it usually doesn't matter, the speed was really what broke it. You know, they keep like adding the speed and then like changing how it works, and I don't know, like just like flopping things around, you know. But the speed was always the problem. Um, the reason the speed is the problem is because, in my opinion, in competitive, it breaks timings of mids. So scouts could use bonk, then on the rollout, right after they spawn, they run to mid, and they're just there, and that whole time while they were running, obviously there's not gonna be any combat, um, so it's a free positioning on mid and a free flank, and it was really broken because of that. I never really liked anything that gave you free speed. I think especially with the fastest class in the game, speed is something really uh speed is something, yeah, really fucked up. So as far as what this does now, um so I guess you drink the Criticola, and then if you attack you get marked for death for 5 seconds. And I assume you're still dealing more damage or mini crits or whatever. So if you attack someone, you have a mark for death. If you don't, you have no downside, I guess, which is kind of strange, because like what they did with the bonk was, even if you don't um, take a lot of damage, you still have a speed debuff. I feel like maybe adding in a debuff regardless of whether you attack or not might be a good idea. I don't know. But I mean, if you don't attack, then it's worthless, and you just don't have a pistol. So, I mean, it probably won't ever come into play. And I'd still probably rather have a pistol that I can consistently deal damage with, where I'm not at risk of getting myself one-shotted, you know? So I think this weapon is fine now. All right, moving on to the Atomizer. So this was probably the other one that was the most complained about. This was legal briefly in the North American scene for like a day, and people were testing it out, and everyone fucking lost their mind. It's so dumb. So the Atomizer. Triple jump as a passive effect is too strong. It makes combat against the scout unpredictable because opponents don't see the bat. Therefore, they have a hard time anticipating the scout's capabilities until late in an encounter. It makes the scout very strong against explosive classes due to a combination of extreme mobility and high close range damage. I would completely agree with that. It was like impossible to know when to expect a triple jump, but now, well, I guess we can get into it, but yeah, you could never know when to expect it, and only taking 10 damage on a jump made it so that if a soldier was fighting you as a scout, right? You could you would either take the 100 damage rocket, possibly by being on the ground, or whatever the splash damage, 60 plus damage, or you could do 10 damage to yourself and do another jump. So the trade-off wasn't really right because it was so it was just so favorable to the scout, and yeah, I don't know. The scout didn't he didn't need to be triple jumping all the time anyways, you know. So let's see. The goal is to require the scout to deploy the bat to take advantage of the extra jump, which is also a signal to other players that they can perform a jump and reduce the bat's negatives to compensate. All right, that's a great goal because that's pretty much, yeah, that's what I was not happy about before. Changes. Triple jump now only possible when the bat is deployed, so it's similar to the winger now. Removed self-inflicted damage, removed attack speed penalty, added melee attacks do airborne mini crits, so it's kind of like a Market Gardener type thing. Added 50% deploy time penalty to prevent quick switch bypass and reduce damage penalty versus players. Okay, so the important ones are here and here, really. So if you want to do that triple jump to, like, you know, survive and dodge or climb spire or climb the crates on granary, you can do it. You're not going to hurt yourself anymore, but you're making yourself very vulnerable because you're pulling out that bat and you're not going to be able to deal damage. So it's not really an in-combat weapon anymore. It's more for positioning, I feel like, or maybe escaping. But I think what people really didn't like about the Atomizer was that it gave you that mobility for combat before. So you could do the triple jumps while you're rotating around a guy meat shotting him. But now you can do your jumps while trying to, you know, be slippery, and it can be, you could probably do some cool moves, but you're not going to be like breaking the game by doing that, you know? You're not just going to be like wiping the server because you don't touch the ground, you know what I mean? Unless you're fucking hitting people on the head with the bat, but it's only going to be a mini crit, and you're meleeing people, so you're probably going to take plenty of damage yourself. So I think this is a great design, and it should allow the Atomizer to see use without it feeling broken, you know, which is great. So moving on then, Flying Guillotine. This weapon is capable of high burst damage under what sometimes seems like random conditions. Mini crits at long range, full crits when the target is slowed or stunned. True. Yeah. That I don't know. I feel like when something hits at super long range, it shouldn't be becoming more powerful. It should become weaker just because of that randomness, which is kind of what I mean, they acknowledge that kind of in the bonk explanation, though they still, you know, give a bonus to the long range impact. I don't know, but at least they acknowledge that, like, spamming something across the whole fucking map shouldn't be like an instant kill, you know? So they're kind of reeling that stuff in a little bit. So remove the feeling of randomness and reward accuracy. Great. Great goals. Those feel like if only that was the goal of every change ever made to TF2, right? Hello, Sparhawk. Thank you for the resub for 5 months. And yeah, let's talk more about the guillotine. So they removed the crit versus stun players. They removed mini crits at long range. They added long range hits, reduced charge by 1.5 seconds. Distance considered long range reduced by half. Okay. So if you're accurate with the guillotine, you can throw it more often, I guess. But you're not going to be dealing mini crits or crits ever. So the total damage output of the weapon has probably been reduced, I want to say. But because it's a projectile-based weapon, I feel like it's not going to be as consistently useful as the pistol. So at best, it's like a situational or like playstyle based or, you know, side grade to the pistol. So like what you might see is someone running this goes to mid, they toss it, it flies, you know, maybe in through like some spam lane to either try to hit the demo or the enemy scouts or, you know, just anyone kind of up on a, like, prepping to fight. and maybe they'll hit someone, but then they don't have a weapon for however many seconds. I don't know the exact recharge time. Um, and then if they miss the next one, like, yeah, they're just like, they're doing nothing. I don't know. So I don't really see it as a problem. I think the mini crits was what people were most upset about, was just that at long range, like the randomness factor of it was too rewarding. So now that that's been removed, I think this weapon should be absolutely fine. Yumcakes, hey, thank you very much for subscribing. Thanks so much. And I hope you are enjoying this analysis. And I hope you're excited about this pyro stuff. Pyro update, I should say. There's actually no pyro stuff on this list. Except the panic attack, I guess. So moving on now. We're on the soldier. Talking about the base jumper. So players often complain the base jumper is frustrating to fight against because the target is simply too hard to hit. This is mostly due to the combination of being able to deploy and retract at will and the amount of steering control they have, which makes them too unpredictable. Changes. Reduce the amount of air control while deployed by 50%. Remove the ability to redeploy the parachute once retracted. Alright, so this is a pretty good change. Like, this is probably actually an amazing change. When this was also legal alongside the atomizer, what you could do with the parachute was what people were doing in competitive at least, and people do this in pubs all the time, is just like they would do a skybox bomb. So just like 2 jumps, they'd jump off the ground, then off a wall, they'd go to the fucking skybox, and then they would just like be flying down, strafing all over the place while spamming the parachute. So they were like falling kind of like at really random intervals, and they were strafing around like crazy. So they were literally unhittable, and it was pretty annoying. Another powerful thing people did with this base jumper though was they would like hover above choke points, which you can still do, but now there's like a much bigger downside to it because you're gonna take fall damage guaranteed if you drop the parachute, and you're gonna get air shot more often. Like, the consistency of falling now should help people air shotting it a lot. I still will probably miss a lot of air shots on people flying around with that thing. But I think this is probably for the best, just because I don't know. It was too random. It was like just annoying. I don't know. You just have to be a little bit more careful with how you use it now. Which I think is fine. Like, you can still hover, you can still unload your airstrike, you can still do all those things. You just gotta float down to the ground or activate your parachute when you're closer to enemies, probably, is what people will do now. Is like, they'll either like stay up top and take the fall damage, or they'll just try to make sure they can land somewhere safely, or they'll bomb someone, and right before they like, right when they get to like close range, that's when they'll start hovering. I imagine that's how people use it, instead of just like hovering way into the sky and then just like dropping at random intervals and like spamming the whole time, you know? So I don't really think people will use this over gunboats that much, whereas when it was legal before, people were using it a lot, just because of how easy it was to not take damage. Alright, so now moving on to Mantreds. The second least used item in the game. Damn. Wait, what was the first? Was it the panic attack? No, they didn't specify. They said panic attack and YER were like some of the least used. But the Mantreds is the second least used. The aerial stomp minigame is difficult and the gunboats are superior in most scenarios. I would completely agree. Unless you are a pubber jumping around with a rocket jumper and a market gardener. In which case, the Mantreds are pretty good for you. So the changes, plus 75% push force, sorry, I reversed the first letters. Push force, not push force. Push force reduction now includes air blast. Now includes air blast, so that's a pretty big buff, I would say. If it didn't already, I'm actually kind of surprised that it didn't. it it used to be. I actually used to consider running the man treads just for the knockback reduction because like um I don't know if it's just me, but like literally every time I would step into a last point, I would just get juggled to fucking hell. I would just go to the ceiling. Especially like what would happen to me is process. I have so many bad memories of this. I'd walk in process 3 and I'm trying to bomb and then the enemy fucking they hit me with a rocket right in front of me, right when I'm rocket jumping, so I just go straight up into the ceiling and then I fall straight down. And it was so fucking frustrating. So there were actually times where I was considering running the man treads, but I never did. So the knockback was already like sort of appealing, but obviously not good enough because I never did it. But now I can resist pyros, which is actually pretty amazing because pyros lately have been like one of the best ways to block an Uber. So if you find that your team is failing a lot against pyros, um, maybe consider running the man treads. But still, you're gonna be like missing the gunboats, I'm sure, or the shotgun, or whatever banner you use. So it definitely is, with that change alone, is creating some more like viability to it. And of course, this is probably one of the most interesting changes in this entire fucking list is 200% air control when blast jumping, which is it sounds like really cool. It sounds really like fun, and I imagine people that are really fucking good at jumping and stuff will make some cool shit happen with that. Um, but man, I can't even like imagine it. Like I'm thinking like I've been playing some Quake Champions lately. It'd be kind of like Anarchy maybe, or Sorlag where you're just like curving around these tight corners. Could be pretty damn cool. For a roamer, you might consider using this, though you are going to take a lot more damage when jumping because you're going to have to not have gunboats. Maybe pairing it with like the Liberty launcher would make you like super mobile, and you'd be able to do a little bit less self damage too. Um, but honestly, it's probably just gonna make those fucking kids on high tower harder to hit. So we'll see. All right. Sniper. Okay, Darwin's Danger Shield. Snipers using this item had an advantage against snipers who weren't. As a result, players felt like they were required to equip this item in order to be competitive. Yeah, that's a great reason to change something. If you feel like you're forced to use something because someone else is using it too, then I feel like it's worth examining a change. And I've probably heard the most complaints about this weapon, I want to say, the Darwin's Danger Shield, because it was just seen as like a crutch. That's like the word that everyone loves to use. Um, Sniper v sniper, you can just like if you're against a sniper that's not running it, you just get headshot, then headshot them, and then you'd win, even if they headshot you first. So it was pretty dumb. So the goal is to remove the increased survivability against snipers, which invalidates the existing design. So that means they had to scrap it, start over from scratch. The new design is to counter ranged burn attacks, such as flares, and strengthen melee fights versus pyros. So it's a completely new approach to it. It doesn't deal with snipers or anything like that. It doesn't deal with any of that bullet resist or explosive resist. Now it's more focused on fire, which is interesting because pyro actually was one of the best counters to sniper at long range, just because you'd have to flinch if you got set on fire. So you have afterburn immunity and 50% fire resist. Um, so you won't flinch from getting set on fire. You will take the initial damage, but you won't flinch at all. So there's definitely some appeal to using this, like on Viaduct or something maybe, if this pyro just keeps fucking sniping you. Um, but then again, remember, you run this, then you're not running Girardi, you're not running Razorback, you're not running an SMG. Like, there's definitely trade-offs here, And this doesn't sound like, I can counter pyros. Is that really going to be better than, um, you know, being able to Girardi someone? I don't know. So it's definitely a rough one. Well, not. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. They're making these choices difficult. Because this is very powerful, but it's still only against like really one class. And I guess you can like maybe melee some pyros, which I don't know, might be funny. Especially after the pyro update actually. Dude, maybe that's what we should do. Maybe I should get someone to vaccinator pocket me. I'll be Darwin's danger shield. Fire resist vaccinator, fire resist sniper. I'm running around just meleeing them. That'll make me feel good. Someone want to do that with me? All right, Razorback. Um, the goal, to reduce the effectiveness of pocketed snipers in stalemates and standoffs. This primarily happens in organized and competitive play. Changes. Added minus 100% overheal penalty. Added shield regenerates after 30 seconds. So this is another huge fucking like trade-off, man. Damn. Because losing the overheal penalty means you're going to be much more vulnerable to enemy snipers. But buffing the regeneration means that, you know, you're probably going to be immune to spies the entire game. Because, well, in like Highlander at least. In a pub, maybe not. Maybe there'll be multiple spies within a 30-second window. But like, if a spy stabbed you in like Highlander, he's usually not gonna like. If he stabbed your Razorback for whatever reason, anyone would ever do that. He he's probably gonna die, right? So he wouldn't have another attempt within 30 seconds, most likely. You know what I mean? So, um, spies are gonna probably have a much harder time against this Razorback in pubs. I mean, it will be the same. Like, you still will never be able to stab someone who has a Razorback, pretty much. But it's actually, I guess, it is a buff. It is a buff for sure, but I don't know, man. I don't fucking know. It'll probably never really come into play. Hello, Germs. Thank you for the resub for 16 months. But yeah, the safety against spies though weighed against the danger of getting hit by spam and headshots. It's another tough decision. So I actually really like what they've done with the Razorback and the Darwin's Danger Shield. I think they've introduced like a lot of decisions to be made. All right, actually I have time. I think my scrim's in like 30 minutes, so no rush. We're moving on to the medic now. The Vitasaw. The Vitasaw. Ubercharge on death is too valuable of an effect to be passive. I would completely agree. And that is why the Ubercharge on death, or that is the reason why the Vitasaw is banned in competitive, because it is seen as free Uber, you know, no real risk to it, no skill to get that, you know what I mean? And the goal is to change the weapon in a way that requires skill and risk in order to gain this effect. Oh, exactly. Perfect. So these principles are they're very well reflected in the Ubersaw, which is one of the most loved unlocks, I think. So if they can make the Vitasaw more like the Ubersaw, that would be a great direction to take it. So the change, they added organs collecting, the organ collecting concept. Each hit with the Vitasaw harvests the victim's organs, shown on the HUD. So it's going to basically be like the heads counter. You know, you collect heads, now you collect organs, which I assume means they will, you know, reset between rounds and obviously erase on death. But on death, you preserve 15% per organ harvested. This effect caps at 60%. So if you somehow let a medic hit 4 saws on you, I mean, I feel like that medic should probably get a reward. So, you know, up to 60%, that means the medic would have had to have full Uber when he was going for melees, which actually, like, I don't know, would it be worth it? Like, what if you were, so when would you, like, actually want to use it? That's the question. Because I know a lot of people are, like, thinking that this is still broken, but like, keep in mind, you have to have an Uber already, like, kind of built up in order for this to be relevant. Because if you're escaping after a post Uber and you get a swing, Like you have 10% Uber, so like what are you gonna do? Um, when you spawn, you have 1%. Like that doesn't really make any sense. Um, if you had full Uber, like if you would have to have full Uber and go for 4 swings, or like get 4 swings, escape, build Uber, then die to spawn with 60%. So like I don't know. I feel like it's almost never gonna be something that would come into play. You'd have to drop Uber to get that 60%, but you'd also have to have gotten 4 fucking swings. That's like never gonna happen, you know? So I feel like it's only gonna be like super high risk situations that are like actually pretty fucking cool, where it's like a medic, um, you know, hits someone once in an important fight and then like escapes with it, and then he he like gets rewarded for that hit and that kill by, whenever he dies, he gets a small amount of Uber. It's gonna be almost negligible every time, I feel like. Mm. Thank you very much, 33 KGB, for subscribing. You think it preserves up to 60, as in if you have 60%, you get 60%? Um, I guess that's maybe a bit ambiguous, but I don't think it will give you Uber charge, like, unless you have it, you know what I mean? I guess it is ambiguous. 15% Uber charge. If you have to have at least 60 to get 60, maybe. But having above 60 and getting 4 swings, when would that ever happen? I'm still trying to think. When would you have more than 60% and be in a situation where you're going to get 4 swings? Leaving middle, you'd have over 60%. But you're going to get 4 swings? Are you fucking kidding me? That's never going to happen. All right? So this weapon should be unbanned immediately. All right. Or when this happens. All right. Let's move on to the crossbow. Bolt healing is very high and significantly outheals the minigun when the target is in combat. This might be okay given the trade-offs, risk versus reward of ranged shots hitting, and the opportunity cost, no overheal. However, it's also the fast way to build Ubercharge under the right conditions. Corner damage farming with the medic behind cover. Damn. They should have said... they should have called out some teams that were doing this shit. That would have been funny. But obviously they'd never do that. Like, they'd say, like, C EVL last season or whatever. Or when Nursey was on the team or whatever the fuck. It's the fastest way to build Uber. So that's definitely the biggest problem with this weapon, is that you can arrow build with it. And arrow building is just fucking dumb. Because it just throws off the timing, and it's like, yeah, it's just dumb. There's no reason arrow building should have ever existed, and I'm sure it was just like a glitch. They didn't realize that it was a thing. So changes the Ubercharge gain rate reduced in the same way the Medigun's healing, and therefore Ubercharge build rate is, based on the last time the target was in combat. Reduced by a third when 1 to 10 seconds outside of combat, and scales up to a normal over 10 to 15. So it's like, this is a bit confusing the way they explained it, but it's kind of like, instead of having crit heals with the crossbow, it seems you're getting like crit Uber percentage building. So that's kind of all it is. And as long as it doesn't outpace the Medigun, I don't really care. They could have removed percentage entirely, and I would have been okay with it. But as long as it doesn't outpace it, I'm fine. Though I am curious if there'd still be a way to abuse it, where if you could have 2 people rotating their building, so you have 3 people arrow building now, right? So that 2 people are rotating between being hurt in the last 10 seconds, while one guy is grinding his like Boston Basher, and maybe you could still get crit heal arrow building to be faster than the Medigun. maybe, but I don't know. Someone would have to test it. Um, but some people, this was definitely the most broken part of the crossbow, but some people might still be upset that, you know, it heals so much. And I could probably live with them, you know, adjusting the way it heals as well to maybe have something to do with crit heals too. Or just like a straight up um, nerf. But I don't know. This is good enough for now, for sure. What I want to see in the future, though, is I want to see the needle guns get a big fat buff. You know, bring those up. I I was trying to push for that, but unfortunately we didn't see it in this list. So hopefully in the future, maybe we have to wait for the medic class pack, you know. But I really want to see needles be brought up to the level of the crossbow, so that the same level of like, you know, decision making between these like unlocks with the other classes can be seen for medic as well. All right, so let's move on now to heavy. Heavy. All miniguns have been changed. The 1-second damage and accuracy penalty now applies to the first second of spin up time, whether or not the heavy is firing. Previously, the 1-second damage penalty would be removed after 1 second of firing. Okay. So you don't have to be shooting, you just have to be spun up, and you will get your ramp up. Accuracy and damage penalties now reset when the heavy spins down, rather than when he stops firing. That means if you stay spun up beyond 1 second and fire in bursts, damage and accuracy will remain at 100%. This is great. So this is actually one of the most unknown things about how heavy actually works right now, is that you have to hold down M1 for your weapon to maintain its like maximum efficiency. So a lot of times if you see me playing heavy, I'll just literally be holding down M1 even when no one's in, even before they've peeked, even after I've killed people and there's no one that I have my crosshair on. I just hold down M1 the whole time because I want to maintain that ramp up. But now I can preserve my ammo, let go of M1, and I can shoot at people and still have the ramp up as long as I've been spun up the whole time. So it is definitely a heavy buff. But it also makes heavy kind of more intuitive and make more sense, which I support. And, of course, these changes are as a result of some of these changes. Because from my understanding, Valve didn't want to make any of these other changes, or these specific changes right here, without providing a buff to the class as well. So this was kind of seen as a non-drastic way of, you know, throwing the heavy a bone while also trying to reel in some of his other powerful unlocks. All right. So here we go. The GRU. The GRU. This has been one of the most game-breaking items in the game for sure. So I'm glad to see it's on the list. And it says, speed, the lack of, is used to balance the heavy's high health, overheal, and damage output. While we still believe it's okay to have a class of items that increase heavy's movement speed, players have been able to easily mitigate the existing negatives. If you recall, the GRU used to like slowly drain your health, but if you're being healed, it wouldn't matter. Or, you know, currently it gives you a marked for death penalty, but you run to mid, you holster it right before you walk through the choke point. It was as if you were never marked at all. So how are they going to change it? They're going to add max health is drained while item is active, -10 per second, and regenerates while holstered. Health will regenerate only the amount drained while active, minus any damage taken during that time. Each time the gloves are deployed, the drain rate is accelerated for a brief period of time. Removed mark for death, removed 25% damage penalty. Wow. So, max health is drained while the item is active at 10 per second. So let's say you run to mid with the GRU as a heavy now. Takes, I don't know, let's say 10 seconds, right? You're going to be down 100 health, you know, 10 times 10, and that's maximum health. So you will be a 200 heavy, you know, when you get to mid. And is that worth it? It depends. What it really depends on is the regeneration. How fast is the regeneration? The regeneration probably needs to be somewhat slow in order for this to still have the, avoid mitigating the negatives again. It would have to like take a reasonable amount of time. Maybe, I don't know, up to like 20 seconds. I don't know. Maybe even more. Um, but now a heavy can get to mid at, with the GRU, but he's going to lose a lot of health for it. So even if he was buffed, if he ran there for 10 seconds, he'd get there with 300 buffed health instead of 450 or whatever. And no, you can't arrow him. This is what you guys are misunderstanding, all right? Some people don't get it. Max health. It says max health. Think about a scout. What's the scout's max health? 125. What's the soldier's max health? 200. What's the heavy's? 300. So if you're draining his max health, you're at 290, then 280, max health. Then to, 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, You're going all the way down. And I'm sure you could, it doesn't say there's a limit on it. You could fucking die. You could just be a 10 health heavy and just decide, you know what? I'm so committed to speed, I'll die for it, and you just die. So I think it actually is going to create a lot more situations where a heavy can be punished. And like if he gets caught with this out, he's going to be punished really hard for it. So it's not just like a free speed boost. Like if you're going to commit to running this thing, you need to be very careful about it, and there's plenty of downside to consider. So I honestly think this item should be unbanned, because this, like, the reason this is banned is because people don't like full health heavies at mid. They don't like 450 health heavies at mid. But because of this, heavies can't possibly have that much health if they get to mid at a reasonable time. So I think this should probably be allowed. That's my opinion of it. And also, each time it's deployed, the drain rate is accelerated. So, it might even go lower than what you'd expect sometimes. So yeah. Eviction notice is kind of like a mini GRU if you look at this, because it's like the same effect, but instead it's 5 per second. But obviously you get less speed if you use the GRU. Or you get less speed if you use the eviction notice. So I'm not sure where like the optimal point will be. Maybe people will rather run the eviction notice and have a little bit more health, or the GRU. I don't know. You'd have to kind of test things. Mr. Pog, you think people can use the GRU to build Uber? Nope, wrong again. Because you're losing your max health, and if you heal someone who's at like full health or full buff or whatever, like your Uber rate is not it's not going faster. At least it shouldn't. I don't know. Maybe you could, but would it even be a problem to be able to build with a melee heavy? I don't know if it would be. It wouldn't be the same as, at least it wouldn't be as bad as before. I don't know. All right. And yeah, the eviction notice, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure if it needs something else. Because right now it just kind of looks like a less punishing GRU. So what I imagine would be like, if you're running heavy like permanently, you'd run the GRU. If you're running heavy only on like last and you're trying to like quickly get in position, you'd probably run the eviction notice, I feel like. I don't know, something like that. That's what I imagine. And we're almost done. Okay, Fist of Steel. The downside of increased melee damage does not ever really come into play when it counts, such as holding a choke point or objective, and when a medic is attached, the resulting pool of effective health is unreasonably large. Yes, I would agree with that. What I usually see people doing with the Fist of Steel is pushing the cart, or like trying to contest a point. And they're doing it knowing that they're worthless, but they just, they can't get punished for it very easily just because they resist so much damage. I've never really liked the melee as the downside thing, but it does have a slower draw speed, so, you could maybe get some melee hits in, but I usually just shoot them with my guns. I don't know. Anyways, the changes. Added 40% overheal reduction while active. Added 40% healing rate penalty while active. So It just essentially makes it so that the tankiness of the item itself is what you have to rely on rather than compounding that with a medic so that it gets to like a ridiculous point, unreasonably large. Um, so I think that's fine. It's a step in the right direction. I don't really think the Fist of Steel is uh, a game-breaking item. I haven't really seen people use it too well outside of Highlander. So I'd be interested to see it in sixes maybe, but it'd mostly be useful like on offense, I think, running a heavy through a choke point to try to um, survive a sticky trap. But maybe it would still need some other sort of downside, but yeah, it's definitely a step in the right direction, just kind of reeling it in a little bit. Um, and now we go to Engineer. The final item here is the Rescue Ranger. And it says, the ability to repair buildings safely from range without using metal is powerful. Combine this with the ability to instantly teleport buildings from far away, which by itself is interesting and useful enough in many circumstances, and you end up with a package that is very strong. Strong package. That's what the Engineer is known for, isn't it? Changes. Ranged repairs now consume metal at a 4-to-1 health to metal ratio, so that repairing is 60 damage. Repairing 60 damage costs 15 metal. 15 metal, 60 damage. Okay. And so if you repaired a sentry, you're probably going to spend what? If it's being focused by like a soldier, you're going to be repairing like maybe 25 metal per bolt. So it's actually similar to the wrench, isn't it? I don't know. I'm sure someone knows the wrench ratio. Um, I feel like if it's better than the wrench, it shouldn't be. Just because as they acknowledged here, like there's already other upsides to it. Being ranged from your buildings on its own so you don't take the same damage as it, and being able to teleport them is like, yeah, it's already a powerful ability. So I feel like you shouldn't necessarily be able to outbuild a wrench. I feel like the wrench should always reign supreme when it comes to repairing your buildings. So if you compared this to the wrench and it's better than the wrench, I don't like that. But if it's worse than the wrench, then I like it. So I'm not sure. I didn't think the Rescue Ranger was game breaking, anyways. A lot of people like were losing their minds over the Rescue Ranger. I felt like if a sentry was gonna go down, it's gonna fucking go down. It doesn't make a difference. Like you Uber your demo just the same. You shoot 3 stickies at it just the same. The sentry disappears just the same. If the guy wants to teleport the sentry back in his spawn, like first of all, he gets marked for death. So if he even dares peek the spawn to like try and put that sentry back down, you just fucking insta kill him, right? And if he doesn't and he just hides in spawn, they don't have a player, so it's effectively still a 5v6. So it was, I don't know, it was never really a problem if you ask me. But a couple interesting things I want to mention here is if we look at just which items here are actually currently banned, we can compare them to this current whitelist. We'll see that there is how many here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is Fist of Steel banned? Fist of Steel is banned. 9, 10. 10 items that are currently banned have all been changed. All right. Unban all those items, and because they've been like improved and made more in line with like a balanced competitive game, and we're getting pretty close to a fucking open whitelist, my friends. Like, let's look at this. Let's allow bonk. Let's allow critical. Let's allow guillotine. Let's allow base jumper, Sandman, Atomizer, Rescue Ranger, Vitasaw, Darwin's Danger Shield, Fists of Steel, GRU. Alright, what's left? What's left, boys? Mad Milk, Reserve Shooter, Disciplinary Action, Steak Sandwich. Fuck. They probably, if that gives speed too, maybe they should have done something about that. But I guess you have to melee only. That should be unbanned. Short Circuit, Wrangler, Quick Fix, Vaccinator, Solemn Vow, Girardi, Sydney Sleeper. That's it. And of those on this list, Soda Popper could probably be unbanned right now. Solemn Vow could be unbanned. Girardi could be unbanned. We could be looking at a whitelist of like literally 5 items right now. Quick Fix needs testing as well. Like this needs to happen, my friends. This needs to fucking happen. But the important thing is we need to actually test these items, guys. And I think, now would be a decent time to kind of maybe start teasing the fact that I am looking into running some sort of event around competitive TF2 with a lot of these items unbanned, if not all, if not an entirely open whitelist. So, you know, I wanna really try and get some useful testing in and some some valuable feedback, because that's what this is all about, guys. Remember, this is all about actually participating and influencing the direction the game moves in. So let's just try and be constructive here, guys. Let's try and do something here. Let's try and take advantage of the fact that we have these opportunities. Another thing I guess that's interesting about this list is there is no pyro and there is no demo man. I guess they're taking all of the pyro stuff and they're keeping it for, they're keeping it close to the chest, until the actual announcement comes out with all the major overhauls. I don't know what they're gonna be. So the pyro changes they've held off on announcing to keep us in further suspense. There are other items that I did expect to see on this list that I would hope to see, in the next balance changing wave, because there's, like I said, there's only a few items left. I'd love to see the Wrangler next time. And actually the Wrangler is probably the biggest one. Maybe Mad Milk. I feel like those are like the two that are still like maybe Sydney Sleeper. Like those three are the ones that need the most like major changes. The other ones could maybe use some slight tweaks. Quick Fix hasn't really been tested enough. Oh, Vaccinator. Also, I hate the Vaccinator. So there's only a few left that are like major changes. There's a couple that would be like no-brainers to change, I feel like the Righteous Bison and the Reserve Shooter, that I am kind of surprised didn't just get like simple changes done to them just to like appease the pubbers. So I was surprised that those aren't in here. But it also does mention up here that there are some other, it's not a complete list, I guess. Some items are still being worked on. So maybe some of those will still slip in, which would be kind of cool. But for the most part, I'd say it's a pretty solid list, and I'm quite excited for the future of, TF2 and the game becoming more balanced. Though I guess we also don't know what the new pyro stuff will do to the balance of the game, but I'm sure it will be interesting. If this is any indication, I think we're on a good path, though. So I hope you guys found some value in me going over all this, and get your voice out there. Leave comments on the forums or on this video that I'm going to be posting, discussing all this. And thanks for sitting through all that. And if you have any other questions about my opinions on other items and balance and how they'll affect the game, feel free to send me a question. Reach out to me on the Twitch chat. All right? Cool. Done. All right, Shounic, upload that shit. I think I have a scrim very soon here.